What we just witnessed in that Senate hearing between a senator and Secretary Kristi Noem is more than an awkward exchange about a legal term. It's a revealing moment about how fragile our democracy can be when those in power misunderstand the very principles that hold it together. The senator asked a simple, fundamental question. What is habeas corpus? It's not a trick question. Habeas corpus is one of the cornerstones of American freedom, a Latin phrase that literally means, you shall have the body. But its meaning runs much deeper. It's the constitutional guarantee that the government cannot imprison you without showing a valid reason before a court of law. It's what ensures that no person, no matter how powerful, can detain another human being on a whim or political convenience. When Secretary Noem answered that habeas corpus gives the president the right to remove people or suspend their rights, it wasn't just a small mistake, it was a dangerous misunderstanding. Because the truth is the opposite. Habeas corpus limits presidential power. It is the people's shield against unchecked authority. It's the mechanism that forces government to remain accountable, to prove cause, and to respect the rule of law even during times of fear or crisis. This right dates back to 1215 to the Magna Carta, when ordinary people forced the English king to admit that he could not lock up his subjects without reason. That centuries-old principle crossed the ocean and became embedded in the U.S. Constitution, because the founders knew the dangers of power without restraint. They had lived under it. So they wrote into our founding document a promise that in this country, liberty would never depend on the goodwill of any single ruler. Throughout American history, habeas corpus has been tested. In times of war, rebellion, and national insecurity. Even Abraham Lincoln, who faced the Civil War, understood that suspending it was so serious that he sought retroactive approval from Congress. And that's the key point the senator reminded us of. No president has the authority to unilaterally erase constitutional protections. Not Lincoln. Not any modern-day president. Not anyone. That's why this exchange matters so much right now. Because when members of an administration entertain the idea of suspending habeas corpus, even hypothetically, it raises a deeper question. Do they understand that democracy is not built on obedience to a leader, but on obedience to law? Do they realize that the right to challenge unlawful detention is not a luxury, but the bedrock of a free society? In that hearing, the senator pressed the issue with clarity and courage. She emphasized that following court orders, even when politically inconvenient, is what separates the United States from police states like North Korea or authoritarian systems like Russia's. Her insistence wasn't partisan, it was patriotic. It was a reminder that defending freedom requires more than slogans. It requires fidelity to process, law, and accountability. When Secretary Noem finally agreed that she and the administration would comply with court orders, it was a small but significant reaffirmation of that principle. But the fact that it needed to be clarified at all shows how vigilant we must remain as citizens. Because rights are not self-preserving. They survive only when people understand them, defend them, and demand them. Later in the hearing, discussion shifted to cybercrime, AI, and national security, all real, pressing issues. But even as technology changes, the core question remains timeless. How do we protect ourselves without surrendering the freedoms that define us? Democrats have long argued that safety and liberty are not opposites. That true security comes from justice, transparency, and the protection of rights for every person, not selective enforcement. And that's the larger lesson here. Knowing what habeas corpus means isn't just about memorizing a legal phrase. It's about understanding the moral contract we all share, that no government can take away our freedom without justification, and that no president should ever be allowed to place himself above the law. In a time when democratic norms are being tested across the world, Americans need to remember that our Constitution is not a partisan document. It's a covenant of restraint, a promise that power will always answer to principle. When that balance is forgotten, tyranny doesn't arrive overnight. It creeps in quietly through ignorance, indifference, and the slow erosion of accountability. So, as we watch hearings like this one, we should not see them as political theater, but as civic lessons. They remind us why participation matters, why voting matters, and why knowledge of our rights is the first step in protecting them. A democracy survives not just through leaders who understand the law, but through citizens who insist on it. If this hearing taught us anything, it's that freedom requires understanding. And understanding requires us, all of us, to stay informed, engaged, and unafraid to question authority. Because in the end, the most patriotic act is not blind loyalty. It's the courage to defend the Constitution that protects us all. Stay informed. Stay active. And remember, democracy isn't a spectator sport, it's a shared responsibility.